Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Assalamu alaikum. Today's guest I'm really excited about. A warm salam to my friend Peter Gould. Peter leads a strategic design consulting firm based in Sydney, Dubai, Beirut, and Jakarta. Gould Studio advocates for heart-centered design to create meaningful brands, cross-cultural understanding, and transformative change. Over 20 years, his engagements have included Apple, Google, the United Nations, Greenpeace, and a diverse portfolio of clients from senior government projects to Web3 startups. His contributions to design have resulted in international acclaim, including a major award from the UAE Vice President. In 2020, Peter was appointed as an Australia for UNHCR ambassador. He is also the head of numerous projects, including the Heart of Design. Design is a spiritual practice course, which you can find online, and we will have a link in the show notes, as well as the Tales of Khayaal, a project of his that we will also have a link to, inshallah. I'm personally really excited to have Peter here. I've benefited a great deal from his insights and wisdom. I took his Heart of Design course and have joined his like-hearted community, and it has been a really transformative experience. In fact, I would go as far as to say that this podcast probably would not have existed as much more than an idea had I not gotten acquainted with Peter. So, alhamdulillah, thank you for joining me, Peter. Walk us through your journey as a creative professional and how you got to be where you are today.
Walaikum salam, Ali. Great to be with you. Yeah, thank you for having me, and really happy to be on your new podcast. Very exciting, and I think very relevant and timely discussion to have, and look forward to seeing how it grows. So, yeah, great to be with you. Okay, so yeah, I'm very happy to share a little bit about the journey, and for great to be with everyone listening. I mean, one thing about I'll say about the concept building with Barakah, it's very much a shared and collective, I think, experience, and having Barakah in our efforts and in our projects is also being reciprocal to our communities and what everyone else is building, and this idea of abundance and idea of this collective spirit, I think is kind of at the heart of this project as well, and that resonates a lot with me. And I'm really glad you came through the Heart of Design program, and I think what you're doing now is a good example of building with that intention to share and collectively imagine this future, and trying to build projects and programs and products and communities with the right intention. And Barakah is wonderful. So a little bit about so just a kind of quick recap. So I now alhamdulillah, I'm in a place where I help lead a global design team. But where that began around 20 years ago now is I coming through university in a design degree. So I actually did a Bachelor of Design here in Sydney, in Australia, where I grew up. And then at the same time, around the same years that I was getting so deep into an understanding of design and design practice, also had my own personal journey into Islam, and became very curious about spirituality and the role of faith in a contemporary age, contemporary experience of that practice. And in particular, I started to look at the relationship between design and Islam, and became curious after I think sort of understood and experientially felt the truth and the timelessness of the faith. I became to a place of thinking about and contemplating the role of design and arts and creativity in the Islamic tradition, a sort of natural set of questions that come with what the heart is drawn towards. And that's really led to, I think, a 20-year journey into trying to explore these two things and their relationship and their history. And it also led to a lot of travel, where I was fortunate to basically save all the money I could each year as a freelance graphic design small firm, and fly to places like Syria or Turkey, or spend some time in doing Umrah, and then going to Lebanon, and sort of traveling a little bit in parts of traditional Islamic cities, and trying to see and feel the role of nature of design and creativity and understand the traditional practices. And then over time, what that might mean in today, coming back to places like Australia or the UK or the US, where I also lived for some time, trying to, reimagine and apply, these traditional, beautiful, principles of understanding to, how we build product and films and culture, and what are the things to think about there. So that's sort of led me to the journey where I am today.
Mashallah, I think one thing that stands out to me is, you really tied like your spiritual journey with your professional one. I think, and we've talked about this before. Sometimes it seems, especially maybe in the diaspora and like the Western kind of communities of Muslims, we tend to kind of compartmentalize our deen a little bit. Like religion kind of lives in one sector of our lives, and then our professional careers are kind of this other box. So, I'm just kind of curious about what your thoughts are on that, and why, maybe dig into a little bit more of how you those things came together for you in your journey, in a way that, maybe for a lot of people, like it maybe just hasn't clicked yet.
Yeah, like I think one thing that one of my teachers kind of shared as I was asking these kinds of questions, connected to, design, entrepreneurship, and what that means as someone on a spiritual path, what, and even what that means exactly in, today's age, is, Dr. Samir Mahmood, and he kind of explained that we have to today make conscious what was previously, unconsciously just applied, or if you think about another way, what was just understood by, for example, practitioners or business people, or people, artists, or craftsmanship in the past, that was just understood because of, they wouldn't necessarily have a book on, like, here they wouldn't have a program or course called The Heart of Design because it's just who they were, that was understood. Whereas today, we've had a very different experience of that. And if you go to a design school today, where I live, for example, you're not going to really get exposed to a lot of those ideas that would be considered, just sort of as a separate kind of, completely separate field of study. For example, if you talk to a calligrapher, as I have done on a number of occasions, the understanding of ahsan and doing work with ahsan and excellence and beauty and love, the practice of preparing a parchment or preparing ink and spending hours and hours cleaning the paper and getting the entire state and spiritual state and deep intentionality before actually committing to ink on paper, that feels so far removed from the immediacy of graphic design and selling products and sneakers and soda that a lot of designers, maybe in, graphic designers, which is what I was studying at that time, we in that world. So I guess it's how do we then look at what were those underlying principles? So, ahsan, or working with ikhlas, like with sincerity, or understanding, I think, your work as an amana, as a kind of gift entrusted to you, that, you've been blessed with these talents and opportunities and education. And, these, this kind of package of just how people, I imagine, were and lived with these principles in their life. Now we need to kind of more actively, I think, explore and embrace what that means. And how do we, so one way to do that is, as I've kind of done, is just look at some of these key spiritual phrases and concepts that have been very present in my journey through Islam in the last 20 years, that I think are quite universal, but they take on specific kind of nuances with the understanding of the Arabic terms and the way that I've kind of been taught them, and how they can apply in our business and in our lives, but also in our design practice. And we're trying to build, or what kind of a product that we might be trying to create. So I think it gives us this powerful lens and perspective, but actively, applying that today. And I hadn't really come across that before. I sort of had they felt like two different tracks of knowledge. And, it's really been an attempt in the last 10 years in our design studio to look at these more directly, and to make that what was just kind of understood, to make it more, actively understood and explored.
That's beautiful. I think
one aspect of it that really stands out to me is, you don't shy away from kind of the business, side of design and the work you do. I remember I'm blocking his name, but I was reading an article by a calligrapher, and he was musing on this idea of like Islamic calligraphy. Traditionally, it was seen as like a craft, like the spiritual goals were the ends, whereas like now, like the way, or I guess art rather, and then craft, I think, was like, there's a specific end in mind. There's some kind of economic value being derived from it, and they're in some ways two different activities. And he was trying to reconcile like how does the modern Islamic artists sustain themselves now.
Mhm.
And I guess for your field is in design, which maybe is, I guess, traditionally more tied with the business side of things. But I'm curious about that perspective of yours, because Islam, of course, has plenty to say regarding, building wealth and earning a living and these kinds of things too. We have these high values, certainly, but I mean, they apply to all aspects of life, not just kind of the maybe romanticized ideal, of art and high culture and things like that. So I'm just kind of curious, like what are some interesting insights that you've learned about that aspect of it? Kind of the sacred and the profane, the mundane and the
Mhm.
the high.
Yeah, well, it's a big set of questions, and one that it's very timely and relevant today, because we have to understand that, earlier, my understanding and kind of basic research is that there were, for people deep into the crafts, deep into artistic pursuits, tradition, and if they did that as their profession, they would have traditionally patrons, or you'd even come through a system of guilds where it was like a kind of a professional understanding. And this was taken to very sophisticated levels in Ottoman courts and divan, where and calligraphers were very highly valued and respected professionally. And there would be a system and an understanding of, and the role of calligraphy was beautiful and was for remembrance of dhikr, but also had official relevance, absolutely. But then all the way through to people just, I think, having a an appreciation for beauty and them and sort of, but not necessarily their profession. And that's a timeless activity that some of us might have watched a Bob Ross video and wanted to go and paint, right? So that's a timeless thing, and there's something beautiful and I think metaphysical about being sort of reflecting on the world and capturing that or expressing some of that. But where it becomes a whole new set of questions and challenges is if you're going to earn your living on that and make it sustainable for your family, for example. And if you and there are many classic challenges there, and then there's some specific ones in our age, very global, very hyper digital, connected world that we live in. And that's when you sort of unleash this whole whole package of difficulties, but also opportunities. So I've kind of, I guess, personally, I've kind of grown out of the tradition of okay, well, if you're going to be a designer, or in my case it was graphic designer 20 years ago, there is a convention. I think there's a sort of client service sort of model, and that's how there's ways to kind of navigate that are pretty well understood, and I've largely kept a part of that centrally for many years in terms of design studio. But surrounding that, there are many different degrees of personal effort and creative or artistic pursuits on one side. And then on the other side, more entrepreneurial activities where you think, okay, this is a problem I want to work on and solve, that I think commercially could be valuable because it's the same problem a lot of other people have. And that might be buying, designing kids' books or kids' toys, where there is a deeper intent behind it, and you want to do something beautiful and inspire young people, or give some parents some access to resources that you think be valuable and beneficial, and have some meaning, but also commercially used to be sustainable. That's the space I've been quite active in as well. Someone once kind of described to me that design is about solving problems, and it's really It's about answering questions, and art is more about asking those questions. So artistic journeys, kind of provoking or inviting questions. But I'd say Islamic art in particular is also inviting one to a place of remembrance and dhikr and contemplation. And so I sort of frame it now as, well, that you might think of in today's terminology as designing for remembrance, right? Designing for remembrance. But we're in an age of designing for distraction, where most of the apps and digital tools and products we consume really are not with a spiritual intent. They're with a designing for distraction to keep us occupied, or wanting the next thing, or wanting to buy this, or wanting to show off that, or so it's and yeah, we just sort of being mindful of that, I think, is important. And then trying to think more deeply about what is your intent around what you're trying to create. Is that it might be initially a personal pursuit, but at what level do you want it to become more a sustainable activity for to help generate the kind of livelihood that you need? And it's actually a wonderful journey, but it's a difficult one, and has many challenges waiting for the people that are bold enough to pursue that.
Yeah. And I think just looking at the work you've done with Gould Studio, I'm sure you've had like so many opportunities to both kind of reflect on what you've been learning as you're working with the Islamic economy in some of these projects, as well as to put it into practice. So I'm curious if if there's a particular I know obviously as a firm you might have some restrictions on things you can talk about, but I was wondering if you could go over an example of maybe a project you've done in your work where you were kind of putting some of these ideas into practice, or maybe struggling a little bit to kind of balance the different needs of others, as well as kind of the spiritual goals and intentions you're trying to keep in your practice.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of my favorites is quite visible and easy to kind of to access is a brand called Salam Sisters. So I bring this up because it did come out of a place of asking questions or a problem that I was facing, and many other young parents I knew, is how we might inspire and empower our young Muslims in particular. So I have two daughters, and I was looking at the content they were exposed to, what toys they had access to when they were younger, and at that time there was not much in terms of representation or authentic. Definitely not. There was not felt like a authentic diversity of Muslim cultures in terms of the toys and content that was available. And whereas so my kids were not seeing that reflected. And as a parent, I thought that was something that we really could do something about. As a designer dad, you kind of have that that spark of like, so what?
Dad bringing his work into the family life.
Oh yeah, always. Yeah, you should interview them one day. That would be very revealing, I'm sure.
Next season.
So what they what I actually did early on, I had a series of different experiments. So while I was doing day-to-day, mostly our design practice, so building brands and developing things like websites and different digital communication projects and apps, for example, we wanted to develop some of our own and just try them out. So for example, actually early on, we put on these 4 different app ideas we had, and we put them on LaunchGood, right, to see what the response was, which was the Muslim crowdfunding site. And so one of the earliest projects we ever did, actually for LaunchGood, it was pretty early too, was to kind of pitch these 4 app ideas and see what they might be. And so one of the ideas was Salam Sisters. It was this, kind of series of activities and beautiful characters and little animated kind of stories for young Muslim girls, where we knew that, whilst probably most parents I know didn't want their kids living on iPads all day, we knew that, inevitably it felt like at some point they're on iPads. So what can we design that's kind of a little more meaningful or hitting in the type of influence we would want them to interact with. So that was one of the ones that got funded, and we went and built this app that was pretty basic, and it got good feedback, but it was very simple. But it wasn't quite enough. It didn't really move the needle enough in terms of like, okay, it wasn't, it wasn't the scale of impact, but the concept was resonate with enough people. So what that led to is a bit of a journey of developing then that kind of resonated with few people. It's one of the people I'd worked with on another project called Five Pillars, the board game, which had done very well. We'd helped design this board game called Five Pillars, which had sold over 100,000 copies. Was like, all right, well, let's develop Salam Sisters. Let's actually take that. Let's speak to some investors and sort of create that as a more serious product line. So we went down this journey, and alhamdulillah, ended up getting the right support. Actually built it into a full product series that had these big 18-inch dolls. We went through like a one to nearly 18-month journey of developing these, launching these, and the response and the outcome was great. We had they all pre-sold. We had them globally, a lot of love and beautiful messages from around the world of different parents resonating with the dolls that had because they came with stories and an app where they can all interact. And what was meaningful to me is not just in terms of they sold well, but just having the response and from a whole range of people, how this resonated with them, and it's the kind of diversity that they were hoping to see in dolls and games. And there were plenty of struggles along the way, and even continue to be, of course. And any kind of someone with a entrepreneurial or designer mindset knows that there's every week will bring something. So the product, I think, was great, and the brand and the story, the messaging. The challenge, of course, was also COVID and production and lots of the difficulties around the big transformation that most businesses that were shipping physical product felt around that sort of time, 2020. So I'd kind of step back a little personally, because most of the design was done and I was focusing on a few other things. So at this point, there's a long waiting list of people who want to buy Salam Sisters, but no actual dolls to buy. They're kind of sold out globally. So they're kind of waiting for, a bit of a reimagining in terms of, post-COVID kind of production world, how to make that happen. But in terms of, I think addressing a real problem, that was strong. And I get asked all the time, where can I buy one of the Salam Sisters? So inshallah, I'd love to see that kind of re-emerge at the right time. And yeah, just trying to align, that was, a clear, I think, a need for that. And, the design execution. There were lots of decisions we made along the way that were, I think, more heart-centered decisions. So one of them was, anyone can basically go to, for example, a factory and buy a generic doll and put a kind of scarf on the doll and say, we've made a hijabi kind of, with some doll character. And indeed, a bunch of people have. But the reason they didn't really resonate was there was, I think, a lot more design intent in terms of the character development, the stories, and the world building around it that we did. But in particular, for example, with the doll faces, rather than just getting a generic and a doll head, we went to Spanish doll makers and worked with them to, who had traditionally, for kind of intergenerationally designed as dolls, worked and created these faces that were had that cultural diversity from 5 different backgrounds, and we worked hard to make these doll faces much more authentic and credible than anything that you could buy at the time from Hasbro or Mattel or Barbie or whatever. There was and so we got that feedback. Even the kind of tones of the skin and the type of response we got from parents was very positive about seeing that, and all these messages from kids saying, it looks like me, or it looks like my mom, that you couldn't get from other top toy brands.
Mashallah.
So yeah, that was a little bit of a fun story, and there's been a few others, but that one is close to my heart.
Yeah, definitely. You kept true with your intentions and very much kind of stayed aligned with them. And that made a big difference in terms of its reception with people, I think. I mean, one nugget that I think maybe was glossed over a little bit in the beginning that I want to pull back is, you tried a couple of different, and this is the practice of design. This is something that's within the secular practice of design, which is you test ideas out and see what people are responding to, rather than kind of have your ego kind of driving the idea, you actually got feedback from people and saw, what were the needs that needed to be addressed. And I think that's what has been so interesting to me about the program that you've been running is just how much of an overlap there is with design as a practice with a lot of Islamic principles. So I think this might be a good transition point because you mentioned that the dolls had aspects of heart-centered design. So I wonder if you could, clue in our listeners a little bit about that concept that you've been kind of working on these last couple of years, and you have that program now. I believe you've started another cohort.
Yeah, so the hard design is I think we're in our sixth or seventh one actually now.
Oh,
Alhamdulillah,
mashallah.
it's been popular, and it continues to have this wonderful group of people from around the world who join, and we're in one currently now. That's really come about. A lot of that is exactly what you said in terms of that, for example, iterating and learning to take feedback and develop and have the patience and the resourcefulness to develop a product through adversity and develop with listening and developing longer term and to evolve products and product lines and all of those important user experience concepts that we need in a design process that I've kind of been practicing for the last couple of decades with developing design projects in consulting kind of space. So a lot of that direct experience formed the basis for the program, and some of the do's, and definitely through plenty of failings and things that didn't work. Applying those as well, especially important is to know what not to do. And I think because I had also tried and explored lots of little side projects and experiments with the intention of being genuine experiments, like launching little projects or products or platforms or websites, that probably dozens really over the last 15, 20 years, and learning through that what year after year. A lot of the time was I serving some kind of need, and then but seeing how big that was or wasn't, or how much of that was also just me going, oh, this is a cool idea, I think let's we definitely need this in the world, but only a few thousand people also agreeing that, versus alhamdulillah, something I launched recently in the last couple of months, it's had much bigger adoption and scale, but it really took a long time to know about understand that a little further, that concept. So the hard design is really, I think, centrally to that is, it helps people develop their ideas and formulate a vision about what kind of problems they kind of work on with more clarity, and then developing their product or platform, or maybe even just the next version of their career or the next kind of step along, with some tools that I've borrowed and adapted from the mainstream, things like reimagining a business model canvas or a lean canvas, but with more of a heart-centered approach. And by heart-centered, I mean applying those basic spiritual concepts that many of us, as Muslims, for example, we become very familiar with in terms of going to weekly classes or reading, or just the basic ways that we live, both with kind of an ethical framework in life, but with specific concepts that we can learn to try to apply. So even, of course, Barakah, the name of with the podcast here, Building Barakah, that's very much like, okay, well, how do you do that? Well, you do that with intentionality and having clarity of intention. You do that working with ikhlas, being sincere about it, and not just looking at this as a way to make money and try to grow 1 billion users. And it's fine if you do earn well and have a very successful business. That's a great thing. And I think you definitely should aspire for that if you're trying to build something commercially. But how do you do that in a balanced way? How do you understand any success you have as a gift and an opening to you, rather than off the back of your own so-called genius? And I'm talking about you as in any of us, not you specifically, that, but and lots of basic concepts in our faith that I think directly relevant and helpful for people on the entrepreneurial path. So just having the right suhbah, having the right companionship, it's a it's a basic universal idea, but I kind of go a bit deeper into that based on my own specific journey and looking at what types of companionship, where do you find them, how do you create, like a bit of a, how does your project or your product become a bit of a magnet for the kind of problem or area you're interested in exploring. These are the kinds of things that I do in the program. And alhamdulillah, it's resonating with a lot of people, and I think it still has a long way to go, but it's just really the alignment of these two journeys I've had the last 20 years of trying to understand design practice and entrepreneurial frameworks, and then thinking about innovation, and even, for example, things I picked up at my time in Stanford or in design school, but also just being around people of knowledge and attending a variety of classes on Islam and spirituality over the last 2 decades. Reading books, practicing, inshallah, as a Muslim, is committed to those basics, but then a lot of specifics that I think are incredibly powerful for entrepreneurs when you get these things. And of course, trying to learn from good role models and examples that, far more successful and helpful than I, but just trying to draw on those experiences that I'm aware of. That's really what the program is about, and hope to develop that into more of a book as well. That's chipping away at that bit by bit. So getting there, inshallah.
Let us know when that drops. We'll definitely have to promote that. Inshallah.
If it's not out by season 5 of your podcast, then you need to come and grab me out of my studio in Sydney.
Mashallah.
Look forward to it.
I love that you talked about suhbah. I think that's such an important concept. It's derived from the same root as sahaba. It's a rich term because it's an Arabic term, so of course there's a lot in there. There's ideas of companionship and fellowship, but also mentorship, and you've alluded to some of these things. You've kind of talked a bit about some teachers that you've had, and also through the Heart of Design program, you have yourself kind of become a mentor. So I was hoping to kind of dig into mentorship a little bit more deeply. I think maybe first, if you want to, talk maybe about an experience or two of mentorship that you've had that's been like particularly transformative.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's right. It's a timeless concept, but it feels we're in an age that it feels like it matters so much. If you can have access to people regularly or semi-regularly that can give you some accountability to your intentions and your efforts, and checking on how that is going for you, but also just positive constructive criticism and guidance and connections. It's not a new idea, but we're in an age where you can potentially have mentors from many different places and sectors, and you can develop meaningful relationships in ways that you wouldn't have access to traditionally pre-internet. So I can think of definitely several. I mean, one of the ones that I find, I guess it's a little more cycling back to this idea of sahba and companionship. We're very fortunate that I have two good friends, and we're quite public because we kind of share. So one is a co-founder of Launch Good, Chris, and the other is Mohammed Faris, who has his whole incredible journey and is, I think, at the heart of a lot of the Barakah movement type of cultural sort of Barakah culture conversations that exist in many entrepreneurial circles definitely in the English speaking Muslim world. And we have, for example, a quarterly review where we just go through all of our, we do like a complete kind of audit on each other, and we take a day to just look at how we're going in different spheres and intentions in our business and our lives, and we've been doing that for some years. And we try to do like a kind of annual retreat as well. So we did, we just came back from one in San Francisco together, where we took a nice road trip down to LA, and we went through and kind of talked through our different plans. And I think everyone should have their own kind of version of that, right? Where you have two people that are in similar kind of spheres of life, seasons of life. We're fortunate we have similar age businesses, similar age kids, so we can kind of share a lot. find two people, or at least one, where you have that accountability, where you can do that type of review together, and just to have some consistency. Quarterly is fine. I mean, but whatever you can do.
So your own personal
yeah,
shura council.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I kind of in hard design, I kind of borrow this concept of the personal board, right? So it's kind of like if every company, big company, will have a board of directors. So this is kind of like your personal board, or shura, exactly. Um, and then, so I've had a great journey with them and others. Just the like-hearted community kind of generally is kind of born out of that. And people who are familiar with that, it's a global kind of loose network of friends, entrepreneurs, and creatives and aspiring creatives and professionals who, we've had different gatherings and meetups, and we have our Slack, which people are welcome to join. So that's, by the way, it's over 1,000 people now in that Slack. We just
Mashallah,
realized.
wow.
So it's
we have to put a link
network.
in the description.
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah, definitely.
Add the next
That's
2,000.
cool. Yes, exactly. And it's so building those kind of communities. And then I've been very fortunate to have just some individual mentors. One of my teachers, Harun Sujic, or Michael Sujic, he's someone I used to spend a lot of time with in Dubai, and his books and teachings and experiences, life experiences, are quite incredible. He has a book called Signs on the Horizon, and another one called Heart's Turn. So he's been someone that's been, and he also lived a, life of, he had a strong, like really amazing professional journey as well. So, in Saudi Arabia, he was there for over 20 years and working professionally, had a, really strong understanding of communications and PR, and working with big corporations. So I like people that have kind of, well, I should say, I benefit a lot from people that have had a strong professional or creative journey, where that's sort of how they earn their means and support their families, but also deeply, spiritual in terms of everything. It's aligned and connected with that path. So look for those people, look for them, and they are, of course, they of course will be around you if you can find them, and even if it's a different kind of sector or industry or space, you'll of course find people you can benefit from, and it's so important to try and do that.
That's wonderful advice. And I would add to that, if it feels like you can't find anyone, make dua. That's always the first step. And then after that, you look for the means, inshallah. Um, you know, one aspect of suhbah and mentorship I kind of wanted to talk to, and I was thinking about this too, as you mentioned that your shura council, you're kind of in the same season of life. You're all kind of in businesses, and mashallah, like I've benefited learning, just from far away, launch good story and productive Muslims. It's great work, mashallah. And you guys, you kind of have a level of maturity in your businesses now. So you're kind of coming to a place where I think other people are looking to you for mentorship as well, and you've engaged in this in Heart of Design and in the like-hearted community. I'm wondering if you have any maybe advice or learnings of the side of being the mentor for maybe others who are listening to this, who are in a similar season of life to you. Maybe they're not necessarily new entrepreneurs. Maybe they've been doing this for a while, or in any kind of leadership or institution building capacity. In many ways, I think mentorship is itself a skill. It's itself also a means to greater knowledge. So I'm just wondering if you have any insights about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And just kind of reflecting on, there's a few ways to think about that. One, and just in terms of exposure and where I'm learning from, or where you're learning from, is, of course, we're in an age of complete abundance. There's just so much content, and there's online courses. There's so many different academic opportunities that our parents never would have had. Under global remote sort of learning, and then there's your face-to-face kind of circles, which you can find perhaps more easily with digital means. I think, and I'll say, when I was in university, 20 plus years ago, there was certain things that you had to, certain things that felt more difficult, and through that, I guess, opened kind of certain doors or opportunities where you really had to, to find a mentor or someone that's willing to be, I had to travel. I had to travel a lot out of Australia to find, teachers and creative, professional creative Muslims, for example. I had to literally get myself out of the country and go and move to San Francisco for a year. And I had to, put myself in Dubai and try to do, and I think maybe by doing that, I think, just physically trying to learn and be in different places, open up different networks, and being in a place of listening and service and support is what became that's how I got to know people like Harun or Chris or Mohammed, is trying to do that. And I think just sort of adding around that is having these different tracks of knowledge. So I've always been curious and invested in design education, but also, Islamic education. And, at the intersection of the two, of course, is what this whole conversation becomes about. But you get access to different kinds of mentors. Some of my, someone that probably wouldn't consider themselves a mentor, but there's people I've sat with where we've hardly exchanged words. We had a tea, just a cup of tea, and just like a spiritual master, and you learn just so much just experientially. Like your whole state is affected by being in a completely different type of presence and consciousness, where you feel like you're learning without using a different kind of language, traditional types of, I think, spiritual connection came through a very important face-to-face interaction that's maybe harder today. I've had some exposure to that, and that was powerful mentorship in a way. But reciprocally, let's say when I was at Stanford, I did it was mostly an online course there, but I did have some in-person modules. And another way of sort of explaining or sharing advice that was spoken in that same regard was, be like the elephant, not like the hippo. And the hippo has a large mouth and small ears. The elephant has large ears and a small mouth, right? So just listen,
I like
right?
that.
And so, yeah, I like it too. So one hand sitting with a sheikh that's, from Mauritania, that, just having a tea with, and you feel your whole state calm and just be in a place of, different place. And then on the other hand, a Stanford professor who lives, or who, 1 hour away, you can also have that more active lesson. So I think trying to find mentors from different spheres, I found valuable. I'm not saying that I've applied and lived up to the ideals that these people would have, but I'm trying. And that mentorship can be in many forms. And ironically, I'd say even sometimes the Uber drive or the taxi between these two locations, you can also have incredible wealth of knowledge from all kinds of people. So don't discount
that. Sounds like a
be
very
curious.
specific anecdote.
Yeah, well, I did that. I liked, I remember, I wrote a whole thing. This is when I was in the Bay Area a couple of visits ago, and I was visiting one place to another. But the best advice I kind of remember was sort of the Uber drive between them, and it was a really nice older African American lady who was talking to me about parenting and her kids, and how to listen and what's the right balance between listen versus discipline, and so you never know. Like mentorship comes in many forms, right?
Yeah, wisdom is the lost property of the believer. I will say though, I do think some of your experiences have rubbed off on you. I think just from my own experience in the Heart of Design class, there are aspects of the way you would run that, and I could go deep into it, but I really think people should experience that class for themselves. But there were just aspects that it didn't feel like an entrepreneurial or work thing. It felt in many ways like there was a real connection of hearts there. And I think that, at least in that aspect, you did a really good job of combining, the Stanford professor with the Mauritanian sheikhs, different types of presence and teaching. So inshallah, there's many more lessons to learn and that you will continue to apply and derive barakah from. So inshallah, we're coming a little close to time. I think just to round this out, if there's anything you'd like to talk about, the future, maybe projects that you're currently working on, that, or maybe just a vision you have for kind of the next step for your design practice or heart of design, like something you'd like to see kind of come to fruition, maybe, or something, maybe a need that the community has that you feel like has not been reached yet, but that you'd like to kind of aim for. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I think I have a lot of curiosity that seems to be amplified in recent times with a lot of community interest in the metaverse, Web3, and exploring this future that we know kind of whether we like it or not is going to be much more digital, and so many of our daily experiences are becoming increasingly connected in ways that some are easy to imagine and others are kind of take us by surprise. I think I've personally had this curiosity for a long time. My major project, my dissertation back in 2000, one or two or three was doing exploring augmented reality.
Ahead of the curve.
Well, there were plenty of people in the space, just more enthusiasts and a few academics, and but I created this kind of working prototype of these glasses where they you could put them on and actually see things in AR based on some open source things and a few of my own kind of designs. And so I've had this curiosity, and many years later, I got what the ill-fated Google Glass, and was and I still have mine. It was and it was one of Google's
they still use it on factory floors or something. I heard somewhere. I don't know if that's still the case.
Yeah, look, there was definitely application of it, but just that you've got to understand the users, and that was definitely more an exercise in like, hey, we've got this tech, how do we sort of retrofit it to something useful, and they didn't quite take. So I'm curious. I've always been kind of curious like that. The last year, I've been very interested in NFTs and the tokenization of experiences and brands, and I think that's going to be a big wave ahead for a lot of brands and people in building product is NFTs, and I've seen some. See, the thing is, there's always noise and greed and all the very the lower nafsi versions of products, and then I think there'll be hopefully a small voice but growing voice, the more heart-centered voice in each of these technologies. How we can use this technology as an amana, like how do we then it's clearly been it's here, what are we kind of doing with it, how are we benefiting people from with this, so
proactively
thinking ahead. Yeah, exactly. And I had a
rather
project
than reactively.
Right. Precisely. There was a project I launched. It was more of a personal project. I want to say 5, 6, 7 years ago, called Islam Imagined. So Islam Imagined, it's Imagined, with .com, was really helping students and kind of educators think through some of these scenarios and think about emerging technologies and how that could be used in useful ways for good, designing for remembrance rather than design for distraction. So I'm a believer in it's more helpful to think about these and what we can do rather than just wait for big corporations, tech brands, and entertainment brands to make everything, and then we kind of run the other direction, go, oh my gosh, it's crushing the world and destroying all of our what makes us human, because that's kind of like what happens to a point. So I'm interested in that, and on the other hand is like creating. So I've helped develop this concept called Tales of Khayaal, which is a kind of fictional series set about 50 years in the future, and it's been in kind of heavy development the last year and a half, thinking through these kind of scenarios. How does this play out? So it's kind of a fictional storytelling way of helping us explore and ask questions about the metaverse, and where is our humanity, where is our spirituality in the future, and how that might play out, and the kinds of questions, the kinds of different interest groups and different corporations. So we've kind of built out this whole world. We've got our first comics coming together, and some pretty cool things coming up. So that's one way of helping us approach this, is through story and imagination. And these are all opportunities we each have. We're all blessed with imagination and dreams and inspiration. So how can we use these for good? That is the heart-centered design approach, inshallah.
Inshallah. Beautiful. We'll definitely, I'll have to follow up to make sure I have all the links right, but we'll have plenty of stuff in the show notes for people to check out. And, if there's any other, if you're looking for, anyone to fulfill in certain roles or anything like that, let me know. And inshallah, I'll also have a note on that. I think we're kind of reaching time, so I wanted to close. I'm experimenting a little bit with the format of the podcast, and inshallah, like you mentioned, Barakah is the main point, and having kind of sincerity and grounding ourselves in our tradition is important. So one thing I wanted to try out is, we have a saying in our tradition that whoever has not thanked people has not thanked God. So if I, for one, have a lot of gratitude towards you because, again, like I was part of the Heart of Design program, and that in many ways really jump-started this project for me. Alhamdulillah. So I wanted to give you kind of an opportunity if there's anybody out there you'd like to shout out and give some gratitude towards. Maybe this is an opportunity to do so. And then inshallah, we can close out with a dua.
Yeah, that's beautiful way to start wrapping up an episode. There are so many. Just for some reason, what came to mind was one of my design professors. Just while we were talking a little bit about the backstory, and Professor John Broadbent was a design professor that I'm in touch with even to this day. He retired a long time ago, but I want to thank him for really opening up some of my thinking about the future and being sort of having an active role in designing the future, if you like, or thinking about that. And he, thank you for helping explore and introduce me to some different authors like Kurzweil and others who have very radical understanding of what the future might be. So and also we did some projects together after he retired around ecology and permaculture, and he really helped broaden my thinking. So that's one person, but there's many others, but I'll just go with him because he came into my heart at that moment.
MashaAllah. May Allah grant barakah and blessing to all those we've mentioned and all those that we haven't been able to mention, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim. Sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim. Ghayra al-maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Ya Allah, put barakah in all of our endeavors. Make us people of sincerity and ikhlas. Make us people who are like-hearted and bring benefit to others. And inshallah, guide us towards those things that bring us closer to you. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.